You're listening to The Builder's Mindset with Mike DiGiovanni, presented by Amazing Mindsets. Well, welcome back to another episode of The Builder's Mindset. We've been talking about a lot of fun things in the past couple weeks, talking about the year-end push. Is it different for publics versus privates? We've been talking about margins. What are good margins? And we mentioned you can reference back to the quarterly earnings report review to get an estimate of kind of where you're at relative to the big publics. We talked about kind of how often purchasing gets stuck being the saviors of the margin for the communities, because I've seen often that we just don't connect the dots on the budget and product is really what happens. We don't tie in like what product should be at a certain particular community relative to its zip code and location. And then because of that, we don't do a great job of tying in what the budget for that product should be. We're often not doing library products, so we're still even guessing what we think that should be. Don't get me wrong, it has gotten a lot better in the last, I would say, 20 years since I've really been in the industry in terms of purchasing being asked more often what the budget should be, purchasing being giving some sense of what the product is going to be when they're asked what the budget should be. And in some instances, we've even gone so far as to actually give purchasing a seat at the table at picking the product, developing the product, etc. And in some really, really forward-thinking places, we've actually let purchasing drive the product development process, which is, as you all know, if you've listened, that's what I'm an advocate for. That's what I've been known for. That's what I'm very good at. And I like to teach small builders, private builders, their purchasing teams, their architectural teams, how they manage that. I like to help them get to that place where those two functions are working in complete 100% alignment with a guidance from the folks who are protecting the budget. Now, I want to talk about construction cost today and what goes into that. What are some of the big key drivers and movers of that needle? And start with one of the things that I think varies significantly from some builders to the other. And these are usually, it either is this way or it is that way. What do I mean by that? So it's a term we sometimes refer to as on lots. That's a really common term in the Western United States. And what do I mean when I say on lots? So on lots typically tend to involve the three biggest needle movers of what I would call on lots are your fence and walls, your flat work concrete, like that concrete that is not a part of the actual foundation of the home, and your landscaping. So those are things, they're on lots, right? So hence the term on lots. And you would say, well, yeah, but Mike, like everything goes on the lot. There ends up being this gray area in those three particular areas for the most part, and they are big cost impactors, but they tend to be big needle movers for the production builders, because whether you bid those out with the land development side or the house construction side is where I think the philosophy tends to get a little kind of wonky. What do I mean by that? So when you're doing your on lots, let's say the flat work, that would be sort of your walkways and your driveways, the flat concrete outside of the foundation of the home. Some conventional wisdom thinks, well, let's bid that out when we bid the curb and gutter and the sidewalks, because we're bidding such a large amount of that we get better pricing. And I don't disagree with that. I think, though, there becomes some challenges and operational orders of operations and coordination that we need to work through with that. But And that same concept has kind of gone into landscape. Same thing. Like we're doing a community. You've got, street trees. You might have a little community park. You might have exterior landscaping at the entry to the community. And so typically, land development is bidding out this curb and gutter, all the city sidewalks or the community sidewalks, and they're bidding out this landscape and street trees, and maybe there's median trees, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe there's like, a main road, like particularly if you think about a master plan community, bigger communities, there's lots of landscaping that isn't on any one particular person's lot. And then also what we have is we talk about walls and fence. Same thing. If you've got fencing, side yard fencing, or side yard walls, or vinyl or wood fence or walls that, partition on the lot lines to signify, or separate the homeowners one lot from the other. Typically in these master plan communities, you have lots of walls and fence that go in, a lot more than what goes on these lots. So a lot of conventional wisdom has gone down to like, well, these particular items will get a better price if we bid them out with the big picture of things. And I don't disagree with that in one sense, but there's some operational things that we need to talk about when we do that. And then there's this other aspect of when you're trying to decide where to put those from a budget perspective, there comes this idea of, well, who's caring for it? So a lot of times what you'll see is if you have an HOA, a homeowners association that's being set up with a community, typically if whatever it is you're putting, even if it's going technically on the lot, if it's to be maintained by the HOA, then often it's going to have, an HOA maintained, can you hear that? So yeah, I'm recording as I'm charging my Tesla, and somebody's alarm just went off. Oh, the joys of the holiday season when you're in the big parking lot. But so sometimes back to the on lot. So sometimes though, what people like tend to do is if it's going to be maintained by the HOA, like landscaping, let's say, even if it's in the front yard of a homeowner's house, if it's going to be maintained by the HOA, which kind of happens in your low maintenance communities, say in Colorado and in your active adult communities, and you're seeing this more and more, what you might end up having is that there's a common meter for that, and all of the water and maintenance that goes into that is being run by an HOA meter and an HOA contract. And so in that instance, sometimes they'll even just like fully put the budget over into the land development side of things and make it part of the community, which makes sense. But when we're just talking straight up about on lots, and let's say those three things for an example, and some other things come up within these from time to time, is what can happen is that the operations of how you install that sidewalk and driveway is going to get built and installed when we build that house. If you don't, it'll get destroyed. If you put it in ahead of time, it gets destroyed in construction. So we tend to put our driveways and our walkways up to the front door and the city sidewalks or community sidewalks in from a scheduling perspective when most of the home construction for that particular lot has been done. Same thing with the landscaping in that house. And then, and the walls as well too, they need to get done operationally in concert with the construction. So wherever you put the budget, you need to allot for and think about that it is best to build those items when you do the construction. Now, lots of us who have like online scheduling programs, we prefer to have that pay point tied into that scheduling. So I prefer to bid that out in a partnership with land development and then work through it with them and take that portion of things and put on the budget. But when we talk about direct construction costs, what we need to do when we're looking from one builder to a next is we need to ask that first. That's the first question I've asked. And I've done some assessments of one builder was looking at buying another builder and comparing their directs to the existing builder directs. And they're like, hey, why are the directs over there so much less for the company we're looking at buying than over here where we're at? And I start digging into it. And the first thing I go look for is where are they budgeting their landscaping, their flat work, and their walls and fencing? And lo and behold, in this example, some builders actually hold a separate budget. It's called on lots. It's not put in with their direct construction per foot costs. And so you just got to know that. And it's very easy, whichever way it is, as long as you know where it is, to kind of calculate that. So one of the nuances. That's one of the nuances when you're putting budgets together. But let's go back, and I want to just really kind of touch on like overall direct construction costs. Generally speaking, for me, the direct construction cost is anything, it should be anything that goes on the lot from the foundation to the roofing and everything in between, including insulation, drywalls, all the way up through countertops, cabinets, and appliances. That's your direct construction cost. And when you hear people talk about that, so when we talk about finished lot cost, that's basically getting everything ready up to that I can come and get on that lot and put a foundation or a basement or whatever. I can start the foundation of that home on that lot. So those are your direct construction costs. And so as I've been talking about some of the other, why is it so important to get a handle on what product we're going to put in that community, and not then, like, this comes when you're looking at buying property, you should be thinking about your direct construction costs and tying that back into what product type, size, spec level, feature set should we be putting on that particular piece of dirt relative to the zip code, relative to the school districts, all of this stuff. And there are great companies out there who can help you if you don't have the internal market analysis team to do this for you, that can help you understand what you should be doing product wise there. And I will tell you, if you figure that out and then work into the product from that information, that's the beginnings of getting your direct construction cost right. So when I hear people tell me, like, I hear this all the time, like, my direct construction costs are like off, they're out of whack. I start with, well, what are your direct construction costs as a percent of revenue? And depending upon the market that you're in, if you're in the West Coast or the Northeast, as I've said before, you should be, in my opinion, somewhere in that neighborhood of low 30s, definitely below 35%. And the lower the better. If you can be in the high 20s, even better. And if you're basically in the rest of the country, Phoenix, Colorado, as we said, gets weird if you're talking about fees, but whatnot. If we take the fees out of it and just the bricks and sticks of the house, Texas, Southeast, Florida, then you should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 to 50, definitely under 50%. If you're over 50%, we need to start looking at that. If you're over 55%, we've really got to start talking about what's going on. And I say is, first start giving yourself that gut check. Ask is, do I have the right product here? Because you can be a little off on your product from a spec level or a feature set or a design perspective, a little off, but you can't be really out of alignment. And if you're way out of alignment, what's going to happen, if you're way out of alignment in terms of you have champagne taste on a beer budget, or you've got a Cadillac in a community where you should be selling GMCs, your direct construction costs are going to be much higher than as a percent of your revenue than what they should be, because location determines what you can sell that home for. I've heard some people lately talk about, like, oh, well, don't give the budget to purchasing at the end of the day, et cetera, et cetera. For me, it's all about math, and it is all about simple math. If I know the zip code and I do the market analysis of the zip code, I should then know what I should be able to sell homes for, what size homes they should be, how many bedrooms, how many baths, generally what spec level they should be in, and that budget should be determined from that place. Then I've got to go design or pick the product that fits into that niche. And if I don't do that, I'm going to be out of whack. So if we're over-spec'd, we're going to have, our direct costs of percent of revenue are going to be higher on those numbers if we're selling normally, because then we're priced right. If we're trying to maintain margins, we're going to push that price up higher to keep that direct as a percent of revenue where we want it to be, but our sales pace is going to suffer because of it. And if we're on the other end of things, and I've seen this before, if we're on the other end and our directs as a percent of revenue are much lower, we could be potentially having the wrong product, or we're leaving too much money on the table as it relates to sales. And in that case, then I look to, are we selling at a pace that's just crazy? Are we selling 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 a month, and we're leaving a lot of money on the table? So a lot of things go into once you've designed and developed that product, and we'll talk about that. That's a whole other episode for another day. But you got to start with the product development. You've got to start with the structure. You've got to start with looking at how many corners you have, how many 45s you have, how many bedrooms, how many baths. Do you How do you put that structure together? Is it 35 wide, 40 wide, 50 wide? All of that, and you've got to put a holistic approach with your architect, structural engineer, your mechanical and plumbing designers, and your HVAC designers, and your electrical engineer. All of that has to come in together in a holistic way and to design the product that is right for the zip code of where you're at. You can't put too much in and you can't leave too much out. It's a fine line, it's a balance, it's an art, not a science. Some builders are better artists than others in this category, in this area. And so that's the big picture concept of direct costs and what goes into them. But what's more important, and the takeaway I hope you get from this episode, is before you say your direct costs are too high, ask yourself, is my product right for the zip code I'm building in, for the neighborhood I'm building in, and is it the right size? Is it the right feature set? Is it the right overall design? Is it overspec'd? Is it underspec'd? Start there. And then look at your percent of revenue, your directs as a percent of revenue. And you can figure out pretty easily where you need to attack. All right. I hope this was helpful. If you have any other things you want us to discuss on this podcast and you want us to go into from the Builder's Mindset, please put it in the comments or hit us up. We're on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to tailor future episodes to what is beneficial to you. We hope you have an amazing day. I hope you're having a great holiday season, and we'll catch you next week. You're listening to The Builder's Mindset with Mike DiGiovanni, presented by Amazing Mindsets.